All right, folks, welcome to paper session number 4 this afternoon. Our first speaker for this session, number 4, is going to be Tiffany Stone Wolbrecht from Associated Universities, Incorporated. Give it up for Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. Y'all having a good conference so far? Yeah, me too. It's been amazing. So I'm going to talk with you guys about one of the projects that I'm working on, because I think it's really important that planetarians are at the table for this one, and I think it would be a beneficial network for you guys as well. That's the Network for the Earth-Space Research, Education, and Innovation with Data. But before I get into the NEREID specifically, I want to share with you just a little bit of information about the organization behind that, AUI. AUI started way back in 1946. We manage large-scale facilities, primarily in astronomical facilities. Some of them you might have heard of, like Green Bank, NRAO, ALMA, back down in Chile. But we focus really on research and development and education. So the education component, of course, is where I'm at. I'm on the education and public engagement team. This is my team. They're amazing. I could go on, but I'm not, because that's not what this talk is about. But I do like to point out that while this team, we come together often and we solve problems together, discuss challenges and roadblocks and how to get through those, how we can leverage our projects to combine, amplify, and make them better. Oftentimes we go off in our own little corners around the world and pursue projects with people like you, people in universities, individuals, organizations all around the world to make projects in STEM education, public engagement possible. And the way that we do that often begins and continues by being curious. We like to ask questions like, how can we make astronomy more accessible? And so some of these projects try to answer that question and many more. Does using professional telescopes remotely affect student learning outcomes and STEM identity? How can astronomy build a better world? Big questions. The question that we're going to focus on with NEREID, what complex challenges can we solve when we reach across disciplines? And that was one of my favorite questions that we were trying to answer back in November of 2019 when NEREID first started. NEREID started at a workshop at Green Bank Observatory in West Virginia. It was a collection of, I think, 28 people, small group, researchers, educators, practitioners, data analysts, people from earth science, space science, big data science. We all came together and we talked about what are things we're working on, what are things we're looking to work on, how do these things connect, what complex challenges are we looking to solve? Now, if you note that date, you're probably thinking like me, oh, they don't know what's coming. So yes, NEREID's definitely been impacted by the pandemic. But at that workshop, we developed our mission and goals. So our mission is to advance research and innovation through education and engagement. That's where you guys come in. And the way that I think about NEREID is that we're trying to create a space for researchers and practitioners, those who take that research and apply it in practice. We want to give them a space to play and to get to know each other, have conversations, and be curious together. So I think that does two really important things. The obvious one is that it allows you all, many of you are practitioners, right, to learn from the researchers. What is the latest research out there? What is it saying about astronomy, about earth science, about education? How can we teach this effectively to our audiences? But I think equally important, it gives the researchers an opportunity to hear from you so that you can influence the next big questions that these researchers are trying to answer. And so this is one way that we provide that space because NEREID, like everything else, got COVIDed, right? This was a virtual cafe-style series that was developed called Convergence on Tap, where we brought, like I said, a casual setting. We brought in a few experts from different disciplines under a theme, under a convergent theme, to discuss what their research is briefly, and then the rest of the time was our guests discussing conversations and big questions under the same theme. So you can see the photos there for Anarchy in the Sea and Sky. That's one example. Michelle and Linda, let's see, Michelle is a space lawyer from Mississippi, and Linda does a lot of environmental work in the California region. And they both gave presentations about really big questions like what rights do natural systems have? Thank you. Let's see. We also talked about what are the difference between ethics and laws, and how do ethics influence laws as we build them in a new frontier like space. It was a really fascinating talk and discussion, importantly. The latest one was the Voyage to New Worlds. That one was actually in person. It was at the AAS back in June, and we had a end of the world scenario because, I mean, right? And so Earth ending, that sucks, but Earth 2.0 has been identified, and we have a spaceship that can fit 100 people on it. Who goes on that spaceship and why? It was a really interesting discussion, and what comes out in my mind was I had this very heated discussion one-on-one with a male colleague of mine, and I was really adamant that gender didn't matter. Science has gone way beyond that, and maybe we don't even need male scientists on that ship. Who knows? So conversation goes in all different directions when you're exploring curiosities with your colleagues and outside of your colleagues too. The Sea and Stars one was one of our earlier ones. In this one, we had the program scientist for the Clipper mission, and actually all of NASA's Europa missions, come and give a talk. Super cool guy, a fascinating talk. And then we had an oceanographer who was giving a talk about deep sea exploration and how those overlap. And they were both nerding out so hard over each other's science that they spent most of the whole talk just talking back and forth about how, hey, I did this one project and it was influenced by NASA's such and such orbiter and blah, blah, blah. It was just really, really cool to see. And it just made it really clear that this space between Earth science and space science is very rich when we come together and have these sorts of conversations. So please join us. We're going to have another on tap, I think January. It's not set in stone just yet. But we are planning to have an in-person summit, smaller workshop in Washington, D.C. in March. We're working really hard to make that as accessible as possible. My goal is that the fees for that will be $100 or less for everyone. And I think we're on track to make that goal. And we also are going to include travel stipends and hotel stipends for people who need it. So if you're thinking about this, at all interested, that QR code will send you to a landing page right now, but registration should open next month for that. It's going to be good. I hope to see some of you there. What complex challenges can we solve when we reach across disciplines? So we're already doing that in our field with Planetarians for the Planet. And yes, this is a shameless plug. Please join us today at the Climate Special Interest Group if you're interested in this at all. We also have a survey out there where we're asking you about stories related to your community and climate science, climate change impacts. We want to try to see if there's common threads between those. Probably are, but we kind of want to identify those. So if you fill out that short survey, you'll be entered for a chance to win this book. Thank you, Ryan Wyatt at California Academy for providing this book. Phenomenal book from a climate scientist on how you can relate things that you're passionate about to climate science to enable open conversations with your uncle at Thanksgiving or with your audiences or whoever you're talking to So really, I cannot recommend this book highly enough, and one of you guys are going to go home with it if you fill out that form before Saturday, 8 a.m., so tomorrow, 8 a.m. Fill it out today, please. Love to hear from you. And if you want to join NEREID, if any of these sound interesting to you, amplifying and creating Earth space resources, addressing real-world problems, and asking and developing big science questions, developing a generation of citizens well-versed in Earth science data and equipped to use that knowledge to better society, and of course, to have fun and feed your curiosity, please join us. It's free to sign up for NEREID. I'd love to see you. And the community, like I said, was affected by COVID, so we're still really building it. It's still new and on the ground floor, and you have an opportunity to shape it, so I hope you come and join me in this group. Do we have any questions? I have a couple minutes.
Oh, let me come to you.
Could you say a little more about the meeting you talked about in February? Like what's going to happen there, if you know?
So the theme is a changing planet, or our changing planet, and there's sort of threads there. So exoplanet is one of them. Exoplanets are fun, right? But then there's also climate science related to our changing planet. And how maybe can we explore exoplanets, and how can that better understand what's happening here and help us think of maybe creative solutions? So those are some of the topics we're going to be talking about, but it is going to be, I don't know if any of you have heard this phrase, but unconferenced format, where we sort of put on the participants. So when you go, you're going to be actively engaged in discussion. Some of it is in person, some of it is sticky notes on the wall, so we're going to have different modes of participation there. And all those details are still being fleshed out, but the idea is coming together to start figuring out or coalescing around some of these big questions that we want to tackle.
Any other questions? Yes.
Just real quick, and I see Tim Spuck is on your group. Have you had any discussions of the Vera Rubin Observatory and the data deluge that is about to start, and how we handle that as either an education community or communicating out to the public?
Yes, absolutely. The era of big data is a huge thread in NEREID, and the VRO has come up quite a lot. It's difficult. What was it? Our speaker just the other day said that our collective knowledge doubles every 12 hours. That blew my mind. But it makes sense. And so how do we organize that? How do we decipher that data? So discussions of metadata and how we create a data literate society, all of those are topics, yes.
All right, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Tiffany. Can we get up for Tiffany? All right, up next, and I hope I do it right, we've got Melanie Isenbarger and Nicolette Terracciano from Ball State University.
Excellent. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Melanie Isenbarger. I serve as the Planetarium Show Specialist for the Charles W. Brown Planetarium at Ball State. I am joined today by Nicolette Terracciano, one of our planetarium assistants, to talk a little bit about intergenerational inspiration and ways that we are able to achieve this through student-led projects at our organizations. And what better person to bring along with me than one of our students? So a little bit about us. Like many of you, we offer public shows most weekends throughout the year, but we also have community groups and school groups throughout the week for private visits. And this takes a team to make this run efficiently and successfully. So we have myself, the Planetarium Show Specialist, of course, our beloved Planetarium Director, Dana Thompson, and we'll learn a little bit about some of the things that she's been working on this week, but she sends her love to all of you. And of course, our team, amazing team of student planetarium assistants that we really rely on to keep things moving. We have 2 graduate students and 3 undergraduate students, including Nicolette here, You can see they are all on different areas of their academic journey. They come from different backgrounds. And this gives us a really strong team of diverse backgrounds. I will turn things over to Nicolette.
Hi, so what you're seeing here is a typical day for a planetarium assistant for a public show. Notice that there is a planetarium assistant doing an activity and a greeter at the door. Everyone will be shuffled inside by another planetarium assistant as well, and of course we do public shows, like I've mentioned, as well as private and school events. For the private and school shows, the assistants have an opportunity to present and basically be like Melanie and Dana for those shows and get some science communication experience, which is a rare opportunity, at least in my opinion, from a student perspective. However, that's not all that we do at the Brown Planetarium. There are some really amazing student-centered projects that we do, and our top 3 favorites, or at least all of my favorites, are the telescope viewing, constellation crew, and my beloved Astronomy Slam.
It's because of all of the amazing work that our students were doing that we were encouraged to do more. We could offer more because of their support to our community, but we could also offer more to our students themselves. So this led us to sign up for an Institute of Museum and Library Services grant, which we were awarded this year. Here's kind of our timeline of events coming up. They actually sponsored our travel here to GLPA this year, so big thank you to them. You can see September, we purchased a solar telescope, which is going to lead us into our next thing here, but October, we had attend and present at the Great Lakes Planetarium Conference, so we're off to a great start. All right, so we also happen to be very lucky lying along the path of totality for the upcoming April 2024 eclipse. This is a big undertaking. As you can imagine, we've already begun kind of creating our network of educators, including our students. We are a limited team. We can't reach everyone in the city, everyone that will be traveling to the city. So we want to create a network of educators to promote safe viewing practices and get people the resources they need. And this grant and the purchase that we made are going to help us do this. Especially our new Coronado Solar Max 3 90mm solar telescope. Yes, so this was purchased through the grant to help us prepare for that eclipse, but we can also use it for astronomy classes, and we can use it on the day of the eclipse as well. And to further support this, we purchased another telescope just to use for our evening viewings to help support kind of our ongoing efforts that we've been working on with our students.
As a planetarium assistant, I have actually participated in helping set up and take down a lot of telescopes. And of course, this is an amazing way, as we all know, to practice that intergenerational inspiration by inspiring, of course, the kiddos. But most surprisingly, you can inspire the older generations as well. I've actually inspired some professors at my university and have recently been thanked by one of my favorites for actually doing observing that had no research connection whatsoever and just purely fun. It ignited his inspiration once again. Oh yes, so Constellation Crew. So we have talked about Constellation Crew in vivid detail in a lot of past GLPA conferences and meetings. So if you would just like to see how it has changed since you last saw it, feel free to check out the QR code at the top. Or if you've never heard us present on Constellation Crew, please check us out as well. We have all of our episodes posted. Really briefly, Constellation Crew is hosted by me this year and is a student-run group, but Crew is very important. It's not just me, it's also our undergraduate and graduate students who are participating. We basically perform a video and do live presentations and pre-recorded, and we talk about a constellation or constellations of our choosing and how to find them in the sky and what mysterious objects also lie within them. This is a kind of sample of our planning document that we typically use. It is shared amongst all of the crew members, and we are able to edit it together. That helps us be able to collaborate with each other and inspire creativity by seeing what the other person is working on, and hopefully that'll inspire some other stuff that our students are assigned to, because we also assign topic by topic to make it easier.
So although this project was originally created in response to closures due to the pandemic, it was created kind of by our planetarium director and then passed on to be an entirely student-led project, currently hosted by Nicolette here. We've learned a lot along the way, and I want to share some of that with you here today. First up, students need more time. Just generally speaking, this is a good rule to keep in mind. Many of us are full-time or dedicate a lot of hours to our work, and it's important to remember that these people are also full-time or even part-time students, which takes up quite a bit of time. So they're always going to need a little bit more of it, like all of us do every single day. Always record a backup. So when we're talking about live streaming any kind of content, it's a good idea to take a backup recording. No matter how prepared you are, things can go wrong, which I think a lot of us have encountered through this new kind of Zoom world that we've been navigating together. I find that people who are actively engaged in their lifelong learning journeys are better educators. So not only are we educating and working with our students, they inspire us every single day. They bring new life and new ideas to our organization every single day. And lastly, trial and error. So what works for us may not work for you. It took a lot of mistake making along the way. And I find when we are working with students, the way that you respond to mistakes that are inevitably made is exceptionally important. So treating them as learning and teaching opportunities rather than just mistakes is very effective.
On the student side of things, there's a couple things that I have learned by being on Constellation Crew, and Melanie said it best in her first point. I do need more time, I really do. I would like to be a part of the planetarium community someday, but that's the key word, someday. Right now, I'm still a student, so I need to make sure that I'm focusing on being a student. Even though I feel very prepared and may have practiced all of the programs that we use to make Constellation Crew happen, like Stellarium, sometimes technology just fails. I can't tell you how many times that the ground has disappeared or the stars are no longer in the sky, and I am live and I still have to keep going. Visibility for me is also very essential, and the Brown Planetarium does a fabulous job of making me feel seen. Sometimes as a student, you're maybe not taken as seriously or your ideas are not being heard because, oh, they're a student, they have so much more to learn. But the planetarium does an amazing job of making me feel like a coworker and not a work in progress. And of course, I do have good ideas. And I may not think it right now because I'm in that box of I'm still a student, I'm still learning, but I do have good ideas, but they need to be good by getting them out in the open and actually sharing them and instead of keeping them stuck in my noggin. And my personal favorite, this is another student-centered project, Astronomy Slam. I'm actually the Astronomy Slam champion of 2021. This is student-centered, so we basically do what most show makers do. We make our own show. We write the script, we create the title, and we have Dana and Melanie help us with the visuals, because of course they know the system better than we do. So we gather all the Lincoln logs, and Dana and Melanie are there to make sure that we actually build a house and not something else. It's a really fun experience, and of course we get to take this show and present it to a live audience. Again, practicing science communication techniques with a live audience is absolutely fantastic.
I'm actually the original Astronomy Slam champion, so who better to talk about it? So some of our goals through this project were to, of course, give students the chance to shine and be the stars of the show, quite literally. We also wanted to open up kind of a friendly competition, because one thing I've learned from attending these conferences is seeing other people present really helps you to develop your own personal style, and I think this is really beneficial for our students to see each other as well. We also make it a really fun event for our community, and we get them involved through our awards. So Astronomy Slam champion, they are given the best overall presentation. And we also wanted to recognize all of our student presenters, so everyone will go home with a trophy and a certificate. And all of these awards are voted on in real time by our audience after presentations, so we can really get them engaged that way. And students can also put these presentations and awards on their CVs and resumes to help support their future endeavors. Another thing we've learned, a whole series of things that we've learned in the last couple years of hosting this, was that the public really wants to support students. We get really good engagement and feedback with our community when we update them on student projects and have our students involved. Secondly, students have personalities. Who knew, right? So really, again, helping them develop their personal presentation styles and teaching them how to work with people with different personalities from their own is really, really beneficial. Third, students may need a push. I would almost argue that students always need a push. We work so closely with our students at our organization that sometimes I think we might know what they're capable of more than they know it themselves. So giving them that little bit of extra support can be very helpful. And lastly, kind of going back to that original point, having a diverse team of students really helps us accomplish this intergenerational inspiration. Everyone is able to reach or connect with a different group of people, so the more people we have involved, the more people we can reach.
Of course, from the student perspective, like we have mentioned many times throughout this presentation, one thing that I have learned is science communication techniques and how to use them in a real-life situation, which is amazing. As you have noticed today, I can clearly have an amazing personality, but still be very professional, smart, and cool. The Brown Planetarium does an amazing job of... Thank you. The planetarium does an amazing job of basically letting me be me at 100% while also polishing me up, making me more refined, which is amazing. And Melanie said it best, I do need a push. When Dana first asked me to be a speaker, my first response was, no thank you, I'm not ready. And Dana was actually very confused and kind of worked with me for a couple of minutes that day to try to remind me that I am ready, and she fully felt that I was. And I walked out of her office agreeing to be a speaker, and I blinked, and I'm Astronomy Slam Champion of 2021, and I wouldn't have been if she didn't give me that push. And finally, openness is essential. It's a nice working at Brown is a nice place to be able to share our ideas and make mistakes without being criticized in a negative light. It's a safe space to learn and to grow, especially with individuals who are older or younger.
All right, one last quick thing here. Like many of you, we are working to incorporate new disciplines into the Dome, so these are just some of the classes we've hosted over the last year. If you're wondering where Dana was this week, she's been working on a very special event that we have hosted for the first time, our Dome Party. So it was an arts showcase in celebration of a speaker we had coming to visit, Dr. Jana Levin. If you haven't heard of her, I encourage you to check her out. She's amazing, trying to bridge the gap between arts and sciences. And to help inspire this event, we had a Poems in the Dome workshop, a guided writing session. If you're interested in keeping up to date with all of the projects we have going on, you're welcome to reach out to anyone in our team or follow us on social media. Thank you.
All right, looks like we have time for one or two questions. If anybody has any questions, yes, bringing it over to you, Dan, Mr. President.
Just a quick comment. You said you wanted to be part of the planetarium community one day. Afraid to tell you, you already are. You're here at the conference.
Seconded. Any other quick questions? No? All right, well, let's give it up for Melanie and Nicolette. Thank you so much. All right, up next we have Mike Murray with the Delta College Planetarium. Give it up for Mike.
All right. Hey, everybody. It sure is good to see you all again. And this year, it's nice to be able to see your entire face, not just your forehead. And, I wanted to say, it's so great to be able to see so many familiar faces again. But I also think it's awesome to see a lot of new faces. And like that last presentation, wasn't that awesome? I mean, that's what we want to see more of. And we love working with students. Also at the Delta College Planetarium, we always have student employees, but we don't refer to them that way. We always want to make sure that they feel like they're there for a reason. We want them to learn a lot of very important skills that, of course, as you all know, go way beyond astronomy. We're talking about communications, we're talking about designing a program, and so there are a whole slew of skills that we love to be able to impart to students. So yes, in the future, please do bring your staff, bring your students here, because we really love to see them get this kind of experience. All right, so my talk is probably going to sound familiar. I'm sure a lot of you have already thought about these things, having gone through the pandemic, the period of isolation, whatever you want to call it. We were closed to the public, our building was, for about 16 months. And so we obviously needed to rethink what was going to happen. We are really happy, of course, that our audiences have returned. And I've already heard from some of the rest of you that not only did audiences return, some of them came back in a really big way. And we were really excited about that. We had one of our best attended summers in many years. And so we know that some of that was because people were eager to get back out, get out of the house and come and explore again. But we had a few things that we worked on during the physical downtime that I think really kind of helped in that regard. Because we were all still employed during the downtime, as far as the professional planetarium staff is concerned. And so a lot of these things here probably will look familiar, but obviously we had to change our emphasis quite a bit. in terms of really putting a little more time and a lot more thought into what we were going to do with these kinds of programs. So I wanted to share with you a couple of things that we were able to develop, but then, now that we've reopened, what of those things do we want to keep? Because it's kind of hard to say yes to everything, right? Even though we want to. Now, I know a lot of you have experience in working with social media. A lot of us now have platforms, and our three most platforms are probably very familiar to you all, but we wanted to put a lot more thought and research into how we used social media. We didn't want to just post commercials about shows. That's not what social media is, right? It's about being social, being able to inspire some reaction, some conversation, some feedback. And so there was a lot of different techniques that we used. We learned, of course, a lot of the basics, keeping the message short, always having a good image, always having a call to action, and a link. And so those things really kind of helped, and our social media coverage really expanded greatly because of that. And we provided a lot of resources for people. One of which was we put a lot of our production efforts into a YouTube series. We had really done very little with that before. In fact, we had just a little almost hidden site on the college's website for YouTube. Well, we created our own direct page, and we created productions that were usually very short, about 5 minutes long. We did about 40 YouTube productions on the constellations. And it was not just, here are the stars. It was like, well, what was interesting about it? What can you find in there? And if there were any hot topics, we would include those as well. So some of those were very well covered. We have about 3,000 subscribers now to our YouTube channel, and we covered hot topics and current events. One of these that I did on using binoculars for astronomy now has 30,000 views. And so some of those things really did kind of help. They built awareness, built a lot of audiences that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. Here's something else I'm sure some of you are familiar with. Because we couldn't see school groups in the theater for a while, we developed virtual field trips. And so we were also very careful about looking at the curriculum, communicating with the science coordinator for the local school districts, and making sure that we could tie in with lessons that the teachers would really want. And it did. It exploded. There were times when we were doing 8 or 9 virtual field trips a week. And so that really helped keep us busy as well. Another thing about virtual presentations is we also utilized Facebook and YouTube for doing live presentations to the public. And some of those did pretty well. We had some that we could usually count on about 500 people tuning in live for some of these. And of course, they went beyond the region. One really surprised us. I always love talking about the Northern Lights, and it's always been an incredibly popular topic at the planetarium. But once I posted a virtual presentation about the Northern Lights, as with many things that go viral, I have really no idea why it did. But by the time we hit showtime, I had 102,000 people tune in live to the presentation. I know, I was like freaking out. I felt like maybe I should be in the University of Michigan football stadium to give this presentation. But anyway, it was great, and it also expanded greatly our membership to that. I mean, we went from having about 10,000 followers on that page to 60,000 followers that are still there. So those are some of the things that we think really helped. I also do a lot of work with radio, and we expanded on that, which go into podcasts. And so that also helped another tentacle, if you will, out into the community to let them know that, hey, we're still here. Hey, we still have programs. And these are some current and topical things to talk about. I know a lot of us have e-newsletters. Thank you. And that one of the things we wanted to make sure we did was to expand on its personal side. So it's not just, again, a listing of shows, but also things like online activities and resources for families, a message that's personal that kind of gives you a little touch of the night sky or whatever you want to cover. Like I mentioned, we published all kinds of online resources for families and for teachers, a lot of STEM activities, and again, a lot of things that are hands-on oriented, not just, oh, hey, go look at this cool video. So we sifted through a lot of those. In fact, some of those are now listed. A very comprehensive list is on the Planetarium network from IPS. One of the things we wanted to make sure is that we could focus a little bit more on some of those underserved populations that usually couldn't get to the planetarium anyway. So we already were heading out to libraries and a few classrooms. Now that's shut down in terms of our physical travel during the pandemic, but we were able to continue doing some presentations, and again, those virtual field trips were really important. Here's one that we also felt that we needed to address, especially after coming back open, and that is, how do we get those school groups that can't afford their transportation? A lot of us have dealt with that, right? So we were able to get some funding from our college foundation, as well as some donations from the local Optimist Club, and our own roundup donations from our new cash register system to help fund for transportation. So we wanted to make sure that we were focusing in the right areas. We wanted to make sure that when we reopened, we reevaluated our programs to make sure that we weren't just throwing anything out there. We wanted to take more time to evaluate shows that we felt our audiences were really going to value and find entertaining. And that includes other types of programming. We've had great success with multidisciplinary programming and for music and art and live performance. And like I mentioned, multidisciplinary. There are all kinds of shows, but also live content. We're looking to work, like Buffalo State is here, with other departments to bring in other subjects into the theater. Again, we also decided to take the opportunity while we were down to move into the 21st century, get rid of our 1988 cash register system, and actually not only put in a modernized point of sale system, because we do have a gift shop, but also a online ticketing system. And that may sound like a small deal, but it was huge for us. It made a big difference. We saw a much higher level of attendance. So in conclusion, I know that's a lot of stuff I just listed, right? How are you going to keep doing all that after you reopen? Well, the answer is simple. What are you going to do? It means reevaluating, because there were certainly a few things we wanted to keep. Some of our virtual field trips are still important for schools that could never come and visit us. And there were some programs that we decided it was time to reprioritize. So while we found some new areas to work on, I think you really have to evaluate your own situation and make sure that you're communicating well with your community, both your educational community and your other community. Because I serve, for example, on the Downtown Management Board for Bay City in terms of their marketing, and several other arts and cultural organizations, and that's a really great way to develop partnerships and collaborations and to find out, get a little bit better feel for the community. So, all right, and make sure that you're networking. Come here and utilize all the help that you can get, okay? Thank you.
Great job, Mike. Do we have any questions for Mike? Bring it over to you.
Really awesome that you have some live videos or regular videos that you post, and I really love that you have an activity to go with it. That's really awesome. Never even thought of that. Do you have any tips for those who wish to go into the social media route for lives and videos, but really need those views? That can be a beast of its own to try to figure out.
You know, the thing I found most important, make sure that you are really well prepared to do something live online, because there needs to be some real thought into visual production, great visuals, great movement, because if it just sits there static and they hear nothing but talking for too long, that's not effective online communication. So we would only usually do once a month, because we wanted that time to really put together a polished presentation.
All right, other questions?
I remember last year you brought up the Aurora and explained how amazing that was. I'm just curious, has there been anything second to that, like that's almost as good, like something that really you were also surprised that it exploded?
Usually it was something of a current topical event, like maybe it was the planetary alignment last year, or maybe it's something like the DART impact. Some of those also ranked way up there. James Webb Space Telescope, we'd love to do more with that. We're one of the NASA community event sites, as they call it, which just means, yeah, we're doing special events connected to the web, and those have been really popular, by the way. Thank you.
Excellent. We still have time for a few more questions if anybody has any.
All right, well, I hope that helps.
Round of applause for Mike.
Oh, one more. Let's see. I always like to include a picture from a previous GLPA conference. Anybody know where this is?
Bay City.
That's Bay City in 2009. You might recognize a few faces in there. A little bit more hair, a little bit darker hair. Find yourself. Anyway, thank you.
Good, good.
All right, so up next, we do have Buddy Stark from the University of Michigan Museum of Natural History. Take it away, Buddy.
Thank you. In the last, I've been in planetariums for about 15 years now, and something that I think will ring true for a lot of you is that the longer I'm in planetariums, there's this sort of gradual deepening of my knowledge of most aspects of planetarium work. So that includes things like the knowledge of how to use the software that I have, how to fix the hardware that's in the system, giving progressively better and more interactive, we've heard a lot of that today, planetarium presentations, right? But the one thing that for me remained a black box until very recently was my lighting system. I knew how to use it, right? I knew how to create buttons and push them, and then some kind of technomancy happened, and then all the hardware around my dome would have pretty lights and things, right? Pretty colors. But beyond just me pushing the button and then it happening, I didn't really understand what was going on. Likewise, you could go to your planetarium software computer and you could type in a command line code, and that, some kind of little techno demon would carry that to the lighting computer, and then it would do its thing, right? So in the last year, I decided to learn a little bit about how this works. So I'd like to start my talk by giving just sort of a bird's eye view of exactly, at least my current level of knowledge for how this works. In your planetarium, there is a computer that runs your planetarium software, whatever that happens to be. There is also a separate computer that runs your lighting software. It doesn't have to be a separate computer, but very often it is. You, of course, around your planetarium dome, you have lots of cove light fixtures, right? And then what you may or may not be aware of is that hidden behind your dome somewhere is one or more of these little black boxes called, what I'm just sort of generally calling ArtNet universe controllers. And the way that it works is when you push that button on your lighting computer, a UDP encoded message gets sent to that ArtNet universe controller that then gets dissected into little bits, and it decides where to send each little raw DMX signal to each individual cove light. And likewise with the planetarium software, what's actually happening when you hit that command and you hit enter, it's sending a UDP encoded message to the lighting control computer that then gets sent on down the line. And so when I learned about this, I focused in on just the lighting computer, and I realized that really all you need there is a piece of software that is able to send and receive UDP encoded messages, which for a lot of us, this has sort of been 2 minutes of gibberish, I understand. But when I realized that, I thought, there's something else that does a lot of UDP messaging, and that's multiplayer video games. That's anytime you're playing a video game with someone that's not in your own network, that's not in your own house, what's happening is you're sending both TCP but also UDP messages to these other people and their other computers. So I decided to try and use one of those to create a lighting engine. I used a game engine called Godot. You could just as well use Unity or Unreal or what have you. But I appreciate open source software and like to use it when I can. I'm also just sort of more familiar. Yeah. Very good. With the Godot Game Engine. And within the indie game development industry, it's known for having, like one of its strengths is seen as having really robust user interface development tools, which for a lighting engine is really all you want, right? You want a good user interface. And of course, it can send the signals that I was looking for it to send. So I started trying to make one, just from the ground up, from scratch. And so my wife called it Helios, because she's way better at naming things than I am, so that's a great name for a planetarium lighting software. And what you're seeing here is the current iteration of how you create a scene inside of Helios. I'm not sure how big it is or how easy it is to read there, but I chose a gradient coloring mode here. I chose a starting color and an ending color, and then I clicked and dragged my mouse across the fixtures, the representations of my fixtures in that software, and it did the math for me and filled in the rest of the gradient. Likewise, I'm trying to make this as user-friendly as possible so that you can then take those scenes that you've made and create buttons in a very familiar sort of control panel page way, recolor, resize the buttons, position things wherever you want. And so this is sort of a blank control panel page that you would add buttons to. And then when you push the button, just like any other lighting software, it would make your planetarium light up. So this is proof of concept. So this is, I closed all the lighting software that we typically use in my planetarium. I installed my little Helios, version 0.1 or whatever. And so what you're seeing here is just some crummy cell phone footage of Helios controlling the lights inside of my planetarium. So again, just sort of a proof of concept that it does in fact work. One thing that I think is going to come up is, a concern with any lighting software in planetariums is that we're all different, right? I have a different number of cove lights than you do. And to make matters worse, depending on who made that cove light fixture, there's no standard for what channel means what. So red is 1 in some of them, red is 2 in some other ones, right? So we have to sort of figure this out. So the first time Helios runs, when it first opens up, it asks you a series of questions. So the idea is eventually I would like to be able to send this out to anyone who would like to use it as a cheap way to install their own lighting system, sort of a DIY sort of thing. I want it to be open source. I have realized I've already worked in some other things, and at the university there's going to be like a team of lawyers involved, so I won't have the final say in this, but hopefully I'll be able to convince them that's the route to go down. And so each site is going to need to be able to configure it for themselves. And so the first time you open it, you would need someone that's fairly tech savvy to answer a series of questions about your particular planetarium, right? How many cove lights you have. There's little testing utilities in the software that will kind of tell you which channels are red and which are green, but you just have to sort of work your way through the series of questions that you're looking at there. So what it can currently do is, as I've mentioned, it's customizable to any dome. This includes things like spotlights and rope lights and vestibules and things. You can create, save, and recall lighting scenes, including things like you saw a moment ago with some motion, so for like rainbow effects and things. There is an editable button page for calling those scenes. You can adjust the fade time between two scenes, and you can control it from your planetarium software. Things that I'm wanting to still incorporate before I give like an initial sort of release and send it to anyone who may be interested in using it is I'd like to be able to have multiple button pages, both in case there's multiple users, but also just to sort of declutter. Instead of having one page with hundreds and hundreds of buttons, you can sort of make sense of it and organize it the way you wanted. I also want to add multiple color layers within a single scene so that you can make a much more complicated sort of effect. Other lighting systems can do this, and I want to make sure that mine can as well. I want to make a show mode for programming multiple scenes together. Right now, the typical way to do this in a planetarium is to create individual scenes and then go to your planetarium software and make a script that call this scene, wait 2 seconds, call this scene, wait 2, etc. And it works, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it seems like we should be able to do that just in the lighting software itself. And finally, one thing that really isn't super, I'm not going to say it's impossible, it isn't really super easy right now with any of our lighting softwares, is sharing scenes between planetariums. And the reason for that is what I talked about earlier. Thank you. It's what I talked about earlier. The fact that we all have different amount of lights and things will show up in different places makes it really hard, not impossible. I know John Farish has he's done some wizardry and figured it out. So it's not impossible, but it's just kind of hard to share planetarium lighting scenes, even if you're using the same software right now. So I'd like to be able to find a way to export these scenes as sort of a universal file that you could just send to some other planetarium. Helios would reinterpret it for the appropriate dome that it's using, and then you would see the exact same scene or a very, very similar scene than that was seen on the other planetarium. So finally, in case anyone is interested in doing this themselves, this slide is sort of the heart of my engine. The most difficult thing to figure out was how the specific syntax used by ArtNet in these UDP messages. That's what's seen in that middle block there. It's an array of 530 values, the first 18 of which are very specific, and that's what tells the universe controller to listen to this. It's an ArtNet signal. You should do something with it. And then the other 512 are the actual DMX lighting values. So that was really tough to solve, and before a lawyer tells me that I can't share it, I wanted to get it out there. So you can take a picture of this, or you can contact me and I can get you. It's also sort of a step-by-step if you want to make your own of how I'm going about doing that. So that's about my time, I think. Any questions for me?
We have any? Oh, in the back. Let me head to you.
Yeah, all right. So you were saying that it was going to be an openware once you actually release it. Yeah, hopefully. So are you planning on releasing it with the idea that people are actually going to be able to edit the engine itself?
That's the idea, yeah. I would like, because, again, I've just been, in my copious amounts of free time, I've been doing this, which is why it's not done already. And so the idea, I'm not going to have, realistically time to support this as a full thing. So if we can have a community that, even just a few people that decide, you know what, I want this feature, just allowing them to be able to go in and make that feature would be a lot simpler than making some kind of list. They have to wait on me to manage to find some time to do it, yeah.
All right, anybody else? Oh, yes, Mike.
You might have been getting to it there at the end, but is this something you're just doing in your free time because you're bored, or are you attempting to solve a challenge, a lack of control that you currently have?
Yeah, I mean, so it comes down to a little of both. I mean, this is just my interest, and I'm intrigued by this kind of thing, but also, there are aspects, and I don't want to begrudge, there are wonderful products that are already out there. But there are aspects of any given lighting software that I'm like, I wish I could, I'm kind of in that boat. I wish I could do this, or I wish I could do this more simply, and so rather than, I'll make it,
One of the things that GLPA has taught me is that something may look like coding, like Python or C++, but it's actually called scripting. So I'm curious, is this a script or is this a code? And if it is, what language are you using?
Yeah, at there's definitely a difference, but there's also sort of a blend there between scripting and coding. This, because it's in Godot can take C#, and very commonly is used C#. It also takes just like there's DigiScript, right? It takes a proprietary language called GDScript, which is largely what you're seeing here. But the steps on the right side would be appropriate for any language that you're using, because it's very sort of universal.
All right, any more questions? All right, round of applause for Buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.